Chapter 1106. Event Easter Egg. The gods certainly wouldn't overlook Steam Bun's strength, but after a close investigation, they all shared the same thoughts as Zhang Batao: incomprehensible. His mechanics are pretty solid, but his decision-making is rather fleeting, Lin Jingyan commented as the most experienced brawler player in the chat. That's what makes it incomprehensible, Zhang Batao sighed. To quote Zhang Jinji, an excessively random player, Lin Jingyan said. That sounds like something he would say, Li Zan laughed. Zhang Jinji was known for his strict manner, so randomness was his greatest enemy. All these assessments are very good. He is indeed very random, and his movements are very hard to predict. He doesn't seem to use his experience and fights by relying on some sort of innate instinct, Zhang Batao said. A natural destructor of balance, Wang Jiexi said. Were there any other players like him before? Zhang Batao asked. Look at who typed before you, Lin Jingyan laughed. The magician was never this random, Zhang Batao said. Is it because the magician's innate instinct is more precise? Lin Jingyan said. That's a pretty accurate explanation, Zhang Batao was in a worshipping state. But do you still have this kind of instinct now, Wang Jiexi? Lin Jingyan asked. Would you like to see for yourself? Wang Jiexi said. Haha, I wouldn't dare, Lin Jingyan laughed. What will Steam Bun Invasion's future be like? Zhang Batao sent another thinking emoji. Wang Jiexi was able to help Tiny Herb win the championships because he had adjusted his playstyle. Steam Bun didn't have the same talent as Wang Jiexi though. Could he continue to persist with such a random fighting style? This kind of problem was difficult to answer, so the pro player chat fell silent. It was unknown what everyone was thinking. Perhaps it was about time for them to go to sleep. The first day of Ghost Parade came to an end. On the second day, the ghosts spawned again at the same time. However, some attentive players would notice that the number of ghosts that had spawned on the second day seemed to be greater than the first day. Kill kill kill. After gaining experience from day one, everyone no longer stumbled over fear before these weak ghosts. Although the ghosts had strong attacks, they had their own unique weaknesses. Even if the players couldn't fully grasp their weakness, everyone could just group up and help one another. As for the big guilds, they no longer hid or stayed on the conservative side. The moment the event started, they publicly announced in the guild for everyone to take note of the existence of any raised monsters. Raising was no longer a method in this type of environment, so all of the guilds gave up on this thought. Since they no longer had any strategical confrontations, it was natural for the leaderboards to have rises and drops on a large scale because everyone's point totals were very close. Of course, the ones in the lead were the pro players. In the end, the ranking was no longer important because it depended on a person's luck and the number of mobs they were able to find. Third day, fourth day, fifth day. The event progressed mundanely. The head start the characters from Happy had achieved on the first day couldn't serve as a strong foundation. Their ranks fell in the overall ranking. After all, effort was useless in this case because luck was something that couldn't be explained. The guild leaders of the big guilds finally let out a sigh of relief. They had been very worried if Yi Shu had any demonic tricks up his sleeve. Now that a few days had passed, their hearts were at peace. They saw Lord Grimm's rank fall from 1st to 7th in the current overall ranking, so all the guild leaders felt an unspeakable happiness from inside. However, they were still unhappy with the player on the top of the list. Deception. Mo Fan's luck in the event for the past few days was pretty good. He was even able to pull a decent lead over those behind him in the rankings. The event only had 2 days left. Unless someone had an extraordinary boost in luck, first place seemed to be Happy's. The guild leaders were also racking their brains and wanted to use different methods to help their pro players. However, during the few days of peace, they had discovered a truth. In this peaceful environment, Yi Shu didn't seem to be so fearful. It was only when they tried to play tricks that they lost everything they invested by encountering Yi Shu. Maybe they should gamble their luck for the next 2 days? If they concocted a plan, Yi Shu might take advantage of it and send all of Happy's characters into the top 10 though. It would be better to stay cautious. As they thought, the top guilds decided to not speak or act. On the 6th day of the event, Deception's place seemed immovable. However, Yi Shu's luck seemed to have gotten worse. Lord Grimm fell straight out of top 10. This brought happiness to all the big guilds just by looking at it. Following Lord Grimm's drop from the ranks, Happy only had Deception, who was first in the top 10, the rest had fallen out of the top 10. On the 6th day, it was the first time that all the spawned monsters were completely eliminated. No one would have thought that there was a bonus here. After the mobs had been cleared out, the system didn't announce the event's end for the day. Instead, it announced that after the monsters were all cleared, their ghost lair had been discovered by 5 heroic warriors. These 5 monster-slaying heroic warriors were Peaceful Hermit, Dazzling 100 Blossoms, Deception, Something to Hide, and Howling Fire. Everyone saw the names. These 5 were definitely not picked at random. They were the top 5 characters who managed to gain the most points today. The system then announced that the 5 warriors would each lead a small team of 5 to enter the Ghost Lair to find the Ghost King. The team who killed the Ghost King would be awarded with their choice of materials and equipment as rewards. When the details of this announcement came out, the teams that didn't make it in today's top 5 stamped their feet and beat their chest. The winner had the freedom to choose their rewards. Rewards like this were too tempting. All teams had a clear plan of what they needed, so rewards that could freely be chosen could complete their most crucial needs. However, the ones who had this opportunity were only those 5 characters. This meant that only their respective teams had the chance of getting this reward. Peaceful Hermit, Team Royal Style. Dazzling 100 Blossoms, Team Tyranny. Deception, Team Happy. Something to Hide, Team Misty Rain. Howling Fire, Team Wind Howl. Every character could bring 5 people, which meant that this was a standard team. The competition between the 5 teams would then unfold in the Ghost Lair, which was suspected to be a dungeon. The people, who didn't get the chance, were cursing, while the 5, who got the chance, were already starting to organize their teams when the system announcement came out. The 5 each received a teleportation scroll to Ghost Lair. If the scroll wasn't used in 10 minutes, it would self-destruct automatically. This meant that they must create a team within 10 minutes. This was too easy for a team. They only had to bring in the formation of the main force and a 5-man team would instantly be ready to go. However, Something to Hide had a bit of a problem. His player, Liu Yining, was a sub in Team Misty Rain. Especially after Misty Rain had enrolled the beautiful Sharpshooter sisters, as another Sharpshooter player, the chances of him leaving this summer were very high. Players, who were put in this sort of situation, wouldn't be in the mood to sacrifice their break to get stronger. This was because there was a high possibility that their character would no longer be theirs next season. However, each person would look at each problem differently. Liu Yining figured that the probability of transferring to another team was very high, so he joined the event with vigor. He hoped his professional and vigorous attitude would give his potential bosses good impressions, which was more beneficial for his future development. There was no difficulty in fighting these monsters for any pro player because everyone would have the same efficiency. Liu Yining's luck was pretty good today since he was ranked 4th and even helped Team Misty Rain get an entrance ticket to the event. When he realized that he was a character about to be abandoned by the team, Liu Yining truly had the heart to throw the scroll away. However, he clearly cared more about the feedback he would receive for his actions, so he could only forcefully raise his spirits to find his teammates from Misty Rain. Another player who had a problem was Deception. The system announcement was very clear about the bonus event, but the entrance ticket was a teleportation scroll that was only valid for 10 minutes. Only Mo Fan knew this detail. He was waiting for Yishu and the others to call for him to group up, but no one knew about the time limit, so they were taking their time in handling the tasks they had in hand. Seconds and minutes flew by. Mo Fan looked around, hoping that someone would notice him. No one did. Neither did anyone send him a message in the game. 9 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes. 2 minutes. Mo Fan was so anxious that he stood up. With that, he was finally able to get everyone's attention. 2 minutes left, he said. Everyone was puzzled. Mo Fan looked at the teleportation scroll, which his mouse was hovering over. It was no longer 2 minutes, but 1 minute and 45 seconds. Form a party for the Ghost Lair, Mo Fan said. Oh, let me see who should go. Yishu looked to the left and right unhurriedly. Quick, 1 minute and a half, Mo Fan said. There's a time limit? Fuck, why did you only tell us this when there's only a minute and a half left? After Yishu understood, he panicked. Little Tang, Steamed Bun, Moocheng, let's go. The moment Mo Fan heard Yishu randomly call out the names of the people he picked, he quickly sent team invitations to the characters. It was only when he was about to type their names that he realized he hadn't even added these people as friends. The sweat on Mo Fan's head was about to fall. His hand speed increased explosively while Yishu was hurrying him. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Due to a slip of his hand, he messed up on of the names. Dancing Rain, such a strange name asterisk. Mo Fan even hurried and cursed at it. At last, the 5-man team was formed when the scroll only had 10 seconds left. Mo Fan didn't even dare delay for half a second as he clicked the use button with a right click. Happy's 5-man team entered the ghost lair. Stay alert. Quote, after they were teleported, this was the first thing Yishu said. Only one team could win the prize, but the system didn't explain how they would get it. Did each team enter different dungeons and compete for the fastest speed? Or did they all enter one dungeon, so they would have to fight the Ghost King as well as one another? None of this was known at the moment. Yishu reminded them to stay alert beforehand in order to avoid the second situation. He quickly spun around in a full circle and began observing the situation in the ghost lair. Chapter 1107. Ghost Lair. Stay quiet for now, Yishu sent this message to the team. Right now, not only did they have to watch, they had to listen, and perhaps they would hear the voices of other teams talking. So everyone kept silent. There wasn't a single sound to be heard. This ghost lair was an underground dungeon, the type where you couldn't see the sky. Yishu looked around carefully and didn't hear anything, but he didn't dare to be overconfident, and sent in the team channel, "We'll use messages to communicate for now." Okay, the others answered. There are 2 paths, which should we take? While Yishu had been examining the surroundings, the others had as well, and Su Mucheng saw that they could take either a left or a right tunnel from their start point. The situation was entirely unclear and there were no clues, so right or left didn't matter. Either's fine, Yishu said. His Lord Grimm was already headed toward the left tunnel. Will there be small monsters? Tang Ru asked. Still not clear, let's just all be careful, said Yishu. As he spoke, the 5 characters had all entered the left tunnel. What's that sound? Yishu immediately sensed something. Everyone listened closely. There was indeed a sound, a sort of rumbling that seemed to be getting closer and closer, and then their cameras began to tremble, as though the ground itself were shaking. At the end of the tunnel, there was a shadowy mass that kept approaching, until they could finally see what it was. What? How cliché, Yishu yelled. Run, Su Mucheng said, already using aerial cannon to retreat. The other 4 also turned their characters and began to sprint back along the path they came. Behind them was an enormous boulder rolling toward them, so large that it filled the entire tunnel. With this, the issue of which path to take was resolved. They returned to their start point and charged into the right tunnel, but that boulder was persistent. The system must have helped it move, because it also rolled into the right tunnel, and continued to chase them. Watch your rhythm, Yishu reminded everyone, seeing the boulder's perseverance. How long would they have to run along until this was over? So they ran and ran, the boulder behind them. There was still no way for them to get rid of it, and the road ahead didn't show any new opponents. It was just one tunnel, continuing on. What's that new sound? At this moment, Su Mucheng heard some new movements. Echoes? Yishu guessed. No, ahead, it sounds like the same thing is happening, Tang Ru said. With her ear training, her ability to distinguish sounds was quite high. No way? That's shameless. The 5 were dumbfounded. They hadn't even done anything since entering the ghost lair. Sending boulders from the left and right tunnels to squish them dead, wasn't this design just too unreasonable? When they thought of that, the 5 couldn't be bothered to continue running. Their footsteps slowed to a halt, but then they heard very clearly, aside from the sounds of a boulder up ahead, there was also the sound of hurried footsteps. Oh hey, another group as unlucky as us, Yishu said. There has to be an exit. Let's continue forward, said Su Mucheng. The 5 once again began their frantic running. At last, they could clearly see the boulder ahead that was rolling toward them. But more clearly, they could see the 5 characters running ahead of it, almost like the opening credits of the animation Saint Seiya. The 5 now discovered Happy's 5, or perhaps they had heard their sounds earlier, but they didn't falter in their steps, because the danger of getting flattened by the boulder was much more pressing than the danger posed by Happy. If they hesitated for just a second, the boulder would crush them. Yo, it's the old bros. As they neared, Yi Shu called out. The 5 that were approaching were none other than Team Tyranny, and the characters were the 5 on their main roster, including the 4 gods. Is there no path on your end? Someone from Tyranny shouted toward them. Nothing, Yi Shu replied. Is this system actually as shameless as you are? Zhang Jiali exclaimed. But right at that moment, the 2 approaching teams simultaneously discovered a thread of hope. Right between the 2 teams, there was an indentation on one side of the tunnel. Did it lead to an exit? They couldn't tell. But this was the only choice they had, unless they just waited to be crushed by the 2 boulders. Lord Grimm dashed forward and was the first to get into this temporary hiding spot. Zhang Zhao's dazzling 100 blossoms was the second to enter, and immediately raised his guns toward Lord Grimm. He didn't fire, but kept a close watch on Lord Grimm's movements. Afterwards, the characters of the 2 teams jumped in one by one. This wasn't any exit, it was just a nook in the wall. With 10 people squeezed inside, it suddenly felt like a crowded elevator. Zhang Jiali, what are you so nervous for? Are you claustrophobic? Yi Shu ridiculed Zhang Zhao's distrustful attitude. Zhang Jiali hadn't relaxed a single bit, and neither had Han Wenqing, Lin Jingyan, or Zhang Zhenji. They all paid close attention to the actions of Yi Shu's Lord Grimm. You ran quite fast, you were the second to enter, Yi Shu continued to talk. The word second stung Zhang Jiali, and he was absolutely sure that Yi Shu was doing this on purpose, because that guy added, what place were you on the leaderboard again? To get the teleportation scroll. For today's leaderboard, Zhang Jiali had gotten second place. Fuck you, as Zhang Jiali swore, dazzling 100 blossoms finally lowered his gun. Not because Yi Shu's taunting made him forget his wariness, but because just now, there was a giant crash as the 2 boulders finally collided, just outside of the nook. Just like that, the 2 teams, 10 people, were shut into a nook that was about as large as an elevator. What's going on? Someone said, confused. There should be an exit, Zhang Zhenji said. Where's the exit? There's not a lot of space here, if I turn around I might hit you with my weapon, Yi Shu said. Hey, don't move now, be good for once, dazzling 100 blossoms raised his gun again. Fuck, don't be so arrogant, you're not the only one who can do that. Lord Grimm raised his myriad manifestation umbrella, now in gun form. Su Mucheng's dancing rain followed suit in perfect partnership, and her cannon was much more impressive than the small pistol in dazzling 100 blossoms' hand. Everyone, look around, see if you can find anything on the walls near you. Zhang Zhenji completely ignored this squabble. And so Zhang Jiali turned his camera to look at the walls near him, when, bang! The sound of a gun. Lord Grimm had opened fire. My bad, it went off accidentally. Yi Shu's voice came almost as quickly as the sound of the gun. Would a game have accidents like this? Of course not. Zhang Jiali fumed, and dazzling 100 blossoms reached for a hand grenade. Calm down, that can't go off accidentally, Yi Shu hurriedly said. It seems like there's something over here. Lin Jingyan's voice finally drew everyone's attention once and for all. Oh, looks like it's nothing, Lin Jingyan said. How do you know? Asked Yi Shu. Because I already smashed it. Lin Jingyan's brawler pulled his fist from the wall. His weapons were claws, after all. With one claw, he destroyed his discovery, and also got his hand stuck there. It looks like there isn't any trick here, said Su Mucheng. Silence. If there was no trick, would they just be stuck in here forever? Try blowing apart the 2 boulders. Tyranny's captain Han Wenqing finally offered this solution. How tyrannical, Yi Shu sent a thumbs up emoji. Straight punch. Han Wenqing was a man of action. As soon as he finished speaking, his desert dust already sent a straight punch toward the boulder on the left, in order to try and send it rolling in the opposite direction. But even with this punch, the boulder didn't move at all. Collapsing fist. Han Wenqing's willpower was similarly unmoved. Desert dust continued with a barrage of attacks, yet the boulder still refused to budge. Emperor's fist. One of the striker's fiercest charged attacks was unleashed. It looked the same as a normal punch, but it would be a big mistake to think that this was only as strong as a normal punch. The Emperor's fist burst forth. At the same time, a silhouette flashed to Desert Dust's side. Lord Grim, a falling flower palm struck the boulder at the same time as Desert Dust's attack. With that, the boulder finally wobbled a bit, as though it were finally about to separate from its companion. But it still wasn't enough. Desert Dust clenched his two fists and his body tensed. Striker level 75 status skill, 1-inch burst. A high-end status in which the attack range was shortened to raise the power of the strike. Desert Dust released a chain of punches, the level 70 skill, Ferocious Tiger Flurry. Light flashed. There was the non-stop sound of strikes hitting the boulder, which continued to lurch back and forth, and finally seemed as though it were about to separate from its partner. Little Tang, Yi Shu called. Coming, Tang Ru answered. Soft Mist twisted her spear, Rising Dragon Soars the Sky. The Battle Mage's Rising Dragon Soars the Sky had a high knockback effect, and was now used by Soft Mist from a close range on the boulder. Yishu's Lord Grim couldn't contribute this high-level attack, and just used another Falling Flower Palm to increase the pushing force. Rising Dragon Soars the Sky slammed into the boulder. The boulder wasn't easily pushed away, but Soft Mist herself was pushed back from the force of the blow. Zhang Jinji's immovable rock immediately stood behind her. Lin Jingyan, Zhang Jiali, Su Mucheng. Everyone's characters immediately clustered together, giving Soft Mist support. Boom! The boulder finally rolled in the opposite direction. Between the two boulders there was finally a gap through which people could pass. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. It knocked away some of my health. Lin Jingyan looked at his character. Just now, when they had all gone to use their bodies to support Soft Mist, they had suffered some damage. Zhang Jinji sent a few heals his way, then glanced at Happy. They hadn't brought a healer. Yishu and Han Wenking's characters had already walked between the boulders to look around and evaluate their next step. Are we going to continue pushing them like this? Someone asked. There's a little bit of space above, we can see if we can squeeze through, said Yishu, after studying the surroundings. The boulder didn't block the tunnel entirely. In order for it to roll along, there had to be some space. At the top, especially at the two sides of the tunnel, it looked as though there were enough space for a character to pass through. We'll go this way, Yishu pointed to the path from which his team had come. We'll go this way, Han Wenking turned to face their own path. I hope we don't meet again. Likewise, said Han Wenking. Alright everyone, let's go. Watch out for these sneaky old foxes attacking us from behind. Hurry, hurry, Yishu directed his team. Chapter 1108. Shards of the Ghost King's Chamber. The two teams took a path each and soon made their way through the gap on top. Two large boulders laid between them. Before they got a good understanding of the ghost lair, it was reasonable for the two teams to not have any real conflicts. However, they still secretly hoped that when the other team climbed over, another boulder would immediately come to squish them flat. Unfortunately, both sides were disappointed. After they climbed over the boulder, the whole path stayed clear. After they walked through the same path as before, the dungeon finally started to open up more. This seems like a tomb. The 5 members of Happy reached the tunnel's end. The room was square and very spacious. It was also quite tidy. Apart from the chamber, there seemed to be no other constructions in the dungeon. After he spoke, the center of the room started to move and creak. A stone coffin slowly rose up from the ground. Is the boss about to spawn? Yishu asked. Ghost King? This easy. We gained without spending any effort, Yishu spoke while the 5 members of Happy started to stand in formation. We should figure out the boss's attack patterns before we start our attacks. We don't have a healer, so everyone should be extra careful, Yishu reminded. Judging from the general event, the ghosts had high attack, but weak defenses. It was easy to handle them after their weakness was found, but before that, they were hard to deal with. Thinking back to the seaweed monster, the boss should be able to deal damage at that level. That ghost's attack was strong to the point it could instant kill anyone. Happy scattered and stood in position. The stone coffin was also finally able to rise up completely from the ground. A creaking sound came out as the coffin lid was pushed aside. The 5 were relatively calm because they had seen too many of these tricks in the game. A player might find it mysterious and terrifying the first time, but they grew insensitive to these long ago. When the coffin lid was shifted halfway, a pale, slim hand rose up to grab the edge of the coffin. The thing that was previously sleeping in there quickly sat up. It was a female ghost. The hair, skin, and clothing all gave hints about it being a female ghost. Yi Shu didn't hesitate and threw a grenade into the stone coffin. The grenade exploded and the female ghost shrieked. Her voice sounded as if she was terrified. Being scared by this type of skill wasn't something that should happen to a boss. The female ghost flew out from the stone coffin and rushed towards Lord Grimm's direction with a shrill shriek. The surrounding area instantly turned piercing cold. Ice attack, Yi Shu called, and Lord Grimm had already rolled to the side. Dancing Rain set up her cannon, and 3 consecutive shots were let out. The female ghost was very quick and knew how to dodge the attacks. This was indeed the sort of intellect only bosses possessed. After dodging past the 3 anti-tank missiles, Tang Ru's soft mist blocked her way. She used series of low-level skills, combined with chasers. This forced the female ghost to a point she couldn't fight back. Be careful, don't fight too close together, Yi Shu reminded. Understood. Tang Ru's focus was concentrated. What other unknown attacks did this female ghost have? They didn't know, but someone had to try. They wouldn't be able to test her thoroughly if they relied on long-ranged attacks, so they could only try with different methods. A fire chaser flew out. The buff from the fire chaser wrapped around Soft Mist's arms and her strength increased significantly. The female ghost let out another mournful scream. She's afraid of fire, so she's a pure ice type, Yi Shu recognized firmly. Gasoline bottle, Yi Shu shouted at Steam Bun. Steam Bun Invasion threw out a gasoline bottle, and as expected, the female ghost was suffering and enraged in every way. Flame cut, Yi Shu called again. Deception sprinted ahead, trails of fire followed behind the ninja blades as they sliced the female ghost's body. The female ghost continued to shriek miserably. As the blade pierced her body, it directly left a cutting mark that seemed burnt. It seemed that this was more effective than the previous fire-type attacks. However, the female ghost's counterattacks also became incisive. She opened her mouth and blew out a gust of icy whirlwind. It was quick and covered a large area. Deception tried to dodge, but he wasn't able to dodge it fully, so his left arm, which got caught in the wind, turned into an ice block. What happened? Yi Shu asked. He wanted to know the effect of this attack. It's frozen, Mo Fan replied. This was the state the system gave Deception's left arm at the time. Can you still form seals? Yi Shu asked. No, Mo Fan said. All his controls that included movements with his left arm were forcibly deactivated. All the seals naturally required both hands, so without his left arm, the seals couldn't be formed. Then it would be like a silence, Yi Shu said. Steam Bun was a good fellow. When he saw Mo Fan's deception was injured, he gave up his safety to help. However, the female ghost was very agile, so after she had injured Deception, she immediately turned around to blow towards Steam Bun Invasion. Be careful, Steam Bun, Yi Shu reminded immediately. Steam Bun had already dashed behind the female ghost, but he didn't expect her to suddenly turn around and blow straight onto Steam Bun Invasion's head. Could it be that his head would be sealed? What were the results of that? Would his intelligence decrease drastically? Because his brain was frozen? Steam Bun roared even sharper than the female ghost's scream. Of course, his roar didn't deal any damage, because key presses were required for an attack. Steam Bun Invasion, who faced the female ghost directly, lifted both his arms with a calm and collected manner. The female ghost opened her mouth to blow a gust of icy whirlwind, but she was lifted horizontally in midair. Steam Bun was able to brush straight past her. Back throw. Steam Bun Invasion threw the female ghost out with a back throw, so the icy whirlwind didn't even manage to brush him. This guy, Yi Shu, was covered in cold sweat head to toe. He managed to use back throw's control to dodge the attack. Yi Shu wasn't sure whether Steam Bun consciously knew what he was doing, but it was a brilliant move nonetheless by replacing defense with offense. So close, so close. In the next second, Steam Bun exclaimed and controlled his character to escape by rolling and crawling. He carefully kept his distance between the female ghost. They had discovered the female ghost's weakness and had witnessed her attacks. Yi Shu quickly adjusted his strategical thoughts, and commanded how everyone should deal with the ghost. The grave chamber was instantly filled with shrill shrieks of the female ghost. After further inspection, the ice-type attack she activated through her shrieks was the fastest and strongest. Finally, with the cost of Steam Bun Invasion's head being frozen, the female ghost was completely taken down within some wave of attacks. Everyone hurriedly rushed ahead to surround Steamed Bun. There was a large ice cube on his head. At this moment, Steamed Bun Invasion looked like a bean sprout. "What's up? Is your intelligence still normal?" Yishu was concerned about his hypothesis. "There's nothing wrong with my IQ," Steamed Bun said. Yishu noticed that his voice was weak. It was obvious that the sound didn't come from the game. His voice had reached his ear in the training room, but it had been sealed in the game. This was very realistic because his mouth was one of the parts that were frozen. "I mean your intelligence stat," Yishu spoke while he clicked onto Steamed Bun to check his stats. His intelligence was normal. The hypothesis that a frozen brain meant lower intelligence proved to be false. Keeping up with the large, frozen head, Steamed Bun Invasion took a few steps forward. He swayed to and fro, which showed his terrible balance. This was probably due to the destruction dealt by the freeze. "Look, what's this?" When everyone surrounded Steamed Bun Invasion, Su Mucheng noticed an item dropped by the female ghost. "Shard for the Ghost King's chamber." Yishu saw it. If there was one shard, there would definitely be a second one, as well as a third, fourth, or fifth. The female ghost was obviously not the Ghost King, but one of his subordinates. The shards of this chamber was probably a type of key to unlock the hidden chamber. How many shards were there? Were they still on the boss? Since they have already collected it, if someone else wanted it, would they have to kill them in order for the shard to drop? Could the teams cooperate by using the shards together? He tried to use it by right-clicking it. The system said that they needed the second, third, fourth, and fifth shard. As expected. Between the 5 teams, the 5 shards could only be used when they were put together. Through this type of method, only one team out of the 5 would have the opportunity to fight the Ghost King in the end. Countless of thoughts flashed past Yishu's head. At that moment, the wall facing them started to crumble. In an instant, the wall vanished. The crushed stones left on the ground didn't seem to match the quantity lost on the wall. When the wall tumbled down, the chamber became even more spacious. Yishu immediately saw a team before them who also just finished watching the wall tumble. Most importantly, a ghost's corpse also laid on their side. It wasn't the fully pale female ghost, but it should have been a ghost on the same level. The people on both sides were startled at first, then they became aware of something. The pupils of the players on both sides contracted. Heavenly lightning, earth and fire. The opponent's attacks came quicker and more direct. Young people. They were always rather impatient. The people who came over from the opposite side of Happy belonged to Team Wind Howl. Zhao Yuji immediately launched an attack. He attacked while using the spell's lights to cover his team. The tomb chamber was wide and spacious, so there were no covers. After going through 2 years of his career life, Zhao Yuji was no longer a fresh rookie. He was one of the excellent players from the new generation, despite not having received a god's title yet. The 5 from Happy dodged hurriedly. It was pretty easy to dodge such a high-level skill when it was launched straight ahead without any base. Even Steamed Bun Invasion, who still carried the large ice cube on his head, managed to sway aside and dodge. However, Zhao Yu's aim wasn't to attack in the first place, his intentions mainly laid in screening. This was a fairly mature way of fighting for Wind Howl. Under the cover of his spell's light, Wind Howl's master of playing dirty, Fang Rui, started to fill the ground with his traps. "Retreat for now," Yishu informed. Steamed Boo Invasion's rhythm was slow and his balance was messed up because his head was still frozen. Happy couldn't fight at full power at the moment, so they could only keep away from the vanguard temporarily. Unfortunately, Team Wind Howl's captain and ace, Tang Hao, was the type who wouldn't let things slip when he had a reason not to. The more Happy retreated, the fiercer he rushed ahead. The Brawler was originally a class that was very nimble and could change constantly. But with the class in his hands at this moment, Demon Subduer was brave and fierce like Desert Dust, the king of fighting. Tang Hao was extremely annoyed over the fact that his brawler didn't have an impressive title. Just like the Battle God, Great Gunner, Sword Saint, and King of Fighting, Demon Subduer should have an extravagant title too. Demon Subduer then rushed ahead with a tyranny that his class didn't originally possess. Chapter 1109. 2 1v4s. He's too arrogant, Yishu sighed deeply upon seeing the ferocity of Tang Hao's Demon Subduer. Old Lin was never so indecent, despite playing a brawler his whole life. Steamed Bun, why is your head still frozen? Yi Shu spoke as he turned around to see Steamed Bun Invasion's big frozen head. Steamed Bun shook his big frozen head and expressed helplessness and regret. Demon Subduer arrived. He was currently the blade of Wind Howl, a dagger that was even sharper than when Lin Jingyan was present. Poison Needle, Gasoline Bottle, Sand Toss. Demon Subduer used a series of skills the moment he arrived. Lord Grimm opened up his myriad manifestations umbrella into its shield form. Tang Hao was enraged and made Demon Subduer leap up. He stamped directly onto Lord Grimm's head as he flew above the myriad manifestations umbrella. The myriad manifestations umbrella contracted immediately. Behind the umbrella stood Dancing Rain's cannon, which was already set in place. Tang Hao's heart thudded. The ray from laser rifle was launched out of the mouth of Dancing Rain's cannon. Eagle Stamp. Demon Subduer forcibly used this technique in midair, which seemed to have allowed him to halt momentarily during the time he stamped. He used the very technique Han Wenking had used against Sun Shang in the All-Stars Challenge. However, the AoE that the laser rifle covered wasn't something one could fully dodge just by making small changes such as a temporary halt in midair. Half of Demon Subduer's body was blasted by the laser rifle, and the strong force made him go spiraling through the air. There was a roof because they were in a dungeon. In the end, Demon Subduer didn't continue to fly in midair, but instead crashed rather tragically into the ceiling. Young people, Yi Shu sighed emotionally as he enjoyed the sight of Demon Subduer embedded in the roof. Tang Hao felt extremely aggravated. Such a penetrating charge was instantly diffused with the snap of a finger. He was even embedded into the ceiling like some sort of hanging light. How could he endure this? However, that wasn't all. Yi Shu wouldn't let things slip when given the opportunity. Such as now, he was sighing with emotion as the muzzle of the myriad manifestation umbrella was aimed at Demon Subduer. With the addition of Dancing Rain, 2 sets of Gatling guns were brought out together. The bullets crossed and shot Demon Subduer in sync. The attacks were very satisfying. Unsightly, it was too unsightly. Even the teammates of Tang Hao found it difficult to watch. They rushed ahead to save him. As a result of this, it was Happy's turn to act tyrannically. Dragon breaks the ranks. Tang Ru's Soft Mist sprinted ahead by using her customary starting skill. The players of Wind Howl, who sprinted ahead and were ready to attack, went past her like a strong gale. Soft Mist didn't bother with the charging players ahead, but passed through a gap between them to look for the healer standing behind them instead. The players of Wind Howl were stuck in a difficult situation. They had their captain at the front, and the healer at the back. Who should they save first? Save the healer, their leader finally gave them a command. Everyone retreated to save the healer in a hurry. Lord Grimm and Dancing Rain's joint shooting was also finally complete, and Demon Subduer fell down. Tang Hao impatiently wanted to attack. A shadow suddenly flickered behind him. Tang Hao was able to notice it, but since he was still adjusting himself in midair, he wasn't able to make too many movements freely. It was as if the other team had prepared for it, because they started their attacks immediately. Countless shadows scattered around Demon Subduer. Ninjutsu, Shadow Dance. Mo Fan was the one who attacked. Deception grabbed onto the chance by giving Demon Subduer a wave of fierce attacks as he dropped from the air. Tang Hao was on the verge of coughing up blood. He had never been beaten into such a wretched state like this, not even when he was playing in professional matches. He was passive in every way, powerless to fight back. He longed for reinforcement, but he had just told everyone to save the healer. If he immediately called out for them to help again, wouldn't it become a joke? Would he have any reputation left? Tang Hao could only grit his teeth and endure. Wait until I reach the ground, he thought to himself. He finally reached the ground. What met him were poison needles, a gasoline bottle, and a sand toss. He used these 3 skills earlier when he sprinted boldly ahead with the grandeur of annihilating Happy all by himself. As Happy welcomed his landing with joy, they used the same 3 skills. Steamed Bun finally attacked. When the ice around his head melted, his condition returned to normal and he became exceptionally nimble. Tang Hao wanted to avoid it, but couldn't. He truly longed for reinforcements, so he spun his camera around. He then realized that Happy had Tang Ru take on the 4 players of Wind Howl by herself. It's been so long and you still haven't taken her down? Tang Hao was truly angry. Honestly speaking, he had never really thought much of Happy, including Yi Shu. Ever since he had gained fame in the All-Stars weekend by usurping the senior as a junior, he naturally possessed a strong psychological advantage when he fought with the older generation. For him, Team Happy was just a combination of old farts and rookies. What was there to fear? A bunch of gods were even seriously analyzing the members of Happy in the pro player chat. Was that necessary? And now, it seemed that the four from his team weren't able to swiftly take down Soft Mist like he had expected. After feeling mad, he realized that he needed to face Happy seriously. Soft Mist was fighting 4 by herself, and he was currently fighting 4 as well. Despite fighting the same numbers, they were in completely different situations. She had the initiative, while he didn't. Soft Mist was doing what he had originally intended to do. He was able to sprint ahead with daring spirit because he had planned to stall the majority of the opposition's main force by himself, like what Soft Mist was achieving right now. Then, his side would have the numbers advantage. This was the role of an ace. But now, he was on the back end. It could be said that the purpose of him as the ace was completely blown off by Happy. He had walked straight into the trap. However, he didn't want to lose face. He didn't want to call for reinforcements because he wanted to take on the burden of the current situation by himself. After Steam Bun Invasion had greeted him with 3 skills after his landing, he dashed ahead with a strangle. Tang Hao was naturally incomparably familiar with the brawler skills. When Steam Bun Invasion slightly moved his shoulder, he predicted that a strangle was coming. Tang Hao hastily controlled Demon Subduer to dodge. No matter what happened at this moment, he would not allow himself to be hit by this type of CC skill. Despite having avoided Steam Bun Invasion's strangle, Demon Subduer was still caught in a strangle. Lord Grimm's Strangle. This was a low-level skill under level 20, so it was natural for the unspecialized Lord Grimm to use it. The strangle was the starting signal for focusing a target. When he was taken down by the strangle, the other 3 immediately launched another wave of targeted attacks. They wouldn't be able to recover because they didn't bring any healers, which increased the risk in fighting, but when focusing on a single target, their attacks stirred the soul. On the other side, Fang Rui's group of 4 was dealing with Tang Ru. Even though Fang Rui was an expert, his style of playing dirty was never a quick-paced fighting method. His specialty lay in continuous consumption. However, Tang Ru's ferocity and boldness made Fang Rui feel uneasy. He most definitely did not disapprove of the players of Happy like Tang Hao. There was no problem in taking Soft Mist down at all, but it definitely was not as easy as taking her down in one go the moment they reached her. More time was needed. If they needed more time on their side, what about Tang Hao? Could he hold on? Fang Rui soon recognized this problem. However, the moment he looked at the other side, he witnessed Tang Hao being in a complete mess as he was tortured by the other 4. His situation was more miserable than that of Tang Ru's. Fang Rui sighed. He knew that Tang Hao's pride wouldn't allow him to call for help. But at the moment, he really needed reinforcement. Switch targets. Under the signal of Fang Rui, Zhao Yu's group of 3 sprinted to assist Tang Hao. They left Tang Ru for Fang Rui to fight by himself because they didn't have any doubts about Fang Rui's abilities. When the 3 switched targets to reinforce the other side, Tang Ru now had a much easier time. After all, Tang Ru wasn't able to take care of every single one of the 4. However, the moment they left the battle to switch targets, Fang Rui immediately said, F***CK. Soft Mist immediately increased her speed. By going from a 1v4 to a 1v1, it was natural for her to suddenly release her battle prowess after the pressure dropped. What Fang Rui didn't expect was Soft Mist's immediate increase in speed to be so astonishing. What type of acceleration was this? At this moment, Fang Rui felt threatened and nearly lost his composure. He was the master at playing dirty, after all. Patience and calmness were top qualities that this style required. However, a mere increase in speed but nothing else had frightened Fang Rui. Then, her hand speed burst forth. A wave of powerful attacks pursued and rumbled its way towards Fang Rui's doubtful demon, the only target. Fang Rui realized that Tang Ru's sudden increase in speed had covered all of the distance between them. He was too busy being shocked that he actually forgot to pull away to a comfortable distance. Thieves weren't specialized in close combat fights. After suddenly having Soft Mist sticking with him, the wave of power smashed Fang Rui's heart into pieces. What made it worse was that the power didn't seem to have an end to it. What type of fighting spirit is this? Fang Rui was unable to relate this with the pretty girl in the report, who was beautiful to the point that one's heart would feel untroubled and pleased. What a troublesome person. Fang Rui came up with this complete analysis. However, despite being hard to deal with, he still believed that he could handle her. Doubtful Demon was on the defensive under Soft Mist's suppression and continued to retreat step by step. However, they were moving straight towards the direction Fang Rui had hoped to reach. Nearly there. Fang Rui counted quietly. As a master at playing dirty, it would be impossible for him to forget where he had previously planted his trap. That was always his strongest weapon. Young people. Seeing Tang Ru's ferocity when she fought closed up, Fang Rui thought to himself. But it's over now. Fang Rui smiled. He was about to succeed in fooling a person. He enjoyed this kind of feeling, the delight when a prey lost its composure the moment it was caught in a trap. What sort of reaction would this pretty girl make? Fang Rui looked forward to it. However, the moment Soft Mist was about to run into his trap, she stopped. Switch positions. I'm here, Yi Shu shouted. The spear form of Lord Grimm's myriad manifestation umbrella flew forward and followed after Soft Mist's previous attack. What did you come here for? Fang Rui fumed. It was as if a good scene was just about to unfold before him, but someone called out, "Cut." It was too anticlimactic. I'm here to teach you how to play dirty, Yi Shu yelled. There weren't many people who dared to say those words to the master. F***ck off, Fang Rui yelled. When facing Yi Shu, the majority of the pro players would lose their composure. Chapter 11:10. Forcing Demon Subduer. Fang Rui didn't immediately contend with Yi Shu. If Yi Shu was over here, then what was happening on the other side? Fang Rui immediately turned his camera to look. When he looked, Fang Rui almost cried. Demon Subduer had always been the symbol of Wind Howl, but the number one brawler in Glory was currently being ridden by another brawler, who was using tyrannical chain punch on him. Fang Rui couldn't help but turn his head to look at Tang Hao, who was sitting not far away from him. It was evident that Tang Hao was furious. The veins on his forehead looked as if they would burst into antennas. What are they doing? Fang Rui found it hard to believe. Didn't they all go over to assist him? Why was Tang Hao being bullied to such a state? When he looked more carefully, he realized that Tang Hao wasn't the only person who was in a difficult situation. The three classes that went over to help were an elementalist, a knight, and a cleric. It was needless to talk about the cleric. He was a strong shield, but not a strong attacker. The knight? Since he moved so slowly in that plate armor of his, he was currently being blown to bits by Su Mucheng's dancing rain. The elementalist. It was unknown what had happened, but the ninja from Happy was able to get close to him through a sneak attack, so Zhao Yuji was also in a thorny situation. However, the greater threat was still behind him. After Soft Mist had switched places with Lord Grimm, she sprinted straight towards him. What is happening? Fang Rui found it unimaginable. He didn't mean to be contemptuous towards Happy, but to be completely oppressed by Happy like this? Retreat, retreat, retreat. Regardless of this, Fang Rui was still a general who could take charge. Although he was shocked at their current state, he wasn't panicked. It was still too early to determine whether this was a victory or a loss. Wind Howl just needed to reorganize themselves. After all, their team made it to the semi-finals last season, so it would be illogical for them to be completely oppressed by a new team like Happy. There was only one explanation: their attacks were too careless. Without having a clear plan behind their attacks, it became very easy for Happy to catch their weaknesses. Happy was able to catch this point and counterattacked. Every mix-up was aimed at their flaws, forcing them into a passive state, making it difficult for them to establish a steady tempo. Excellent Era was defeated in the same way in the Challenger League. At least Excellent Era had the advantage in equipment at the time. They had made preparations as well, unlike Wind Howl. As a result, it wasn't surprising that Wind Howl was in an even more embarrassing situation. In any case, they should fully break away from the fight in order to cut off Happy's tempo. After that, they could start anew. Fang Rui thought. Instead of challenging Yi Shu by himself, he quickly turned away to provide cover for his teammates to retreat. In the end, it's the experienced players who are harder to deal with. When Yishu saw Feng Rui's decision, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. However, he still continued to taunt, "Why are you running, you crude thief? Won't you listen to my lecture?" Feng Rui ignored him. He was regretful that the middle finger wasn't an emoji, otherwise, he would definitely pointing it at Yishu. Doubtful Demon continued to run. He continuously planted traps in order to shrink Happy's maneuver space. Lord Grimm pursued him, but how could Feng Rui give him another chance to close in again? He increased his speed to sprint all over the place. Thieves weren't able to directly break through places like certain ferocious classes, but by letting him lay out his pieces in formation, the limitations that he created would affect the battle as a whole. Yishu knew about this, but Feng Rui wasn't an opponent he could catch just by wanting to. The master of playing dirty wasn't a joke. As a result, Yishu decided not to waste any more energy and switched targets. F***CK, this guy wants to kill Tang Hao. Feng Rui immediately perceived Yishu's intentions. As expected, it was unrealistic for him to divert Yishu's attention so easily. In the end, it's the experienced players who are harder to deal with. Feng Rui came up with the same evaluation. The oppressed Tang Hao was finally able to find an opportunity to break out. After all, Steamed Bun couldn't oppress him forever. Uppercut, knee attack, powerful knee strike. Tang Hao delivered a wave of counterattacks after seizing the opportunity. He nailed Steamed Bun invasion onto the wall in an instant. He then spun his view around. In the end, he still remembered to take note of their situation first and saw Soft Mist charging forward in a threatening and aggressive manner. Tang Ru originally intended to fight Zhao Yu's Elementalist with Mo Fan, but when she saw Steamed Bun being knocked over by Tang Hao, she immediately assisted him first. Tang Hao let out a cold HMPH. He was incomparably confident in a direct confrontation. Demon Subduer didn't retreat and sprinted straight towards Soft Mist. "You're fierce. I'll be even fiercer." Tang Hao liked this style. He wasn't afraid, so Tang Ru was even more fearless. When it seemed like the two characters were about to clash, Tang Hao took advantage of a brawler's mid-ranged attacks and launched the first attack. As his body flickered, he sneakily threw out a poison needle. If you played a brawler and couldn't play dirty, then you couldn't possibly be qualified to be called a brawler. This class had many skills that were suited to trick people. Tang Ru didn't detect Demon Subduer's hidden poison needle sneak attack, so she was hit by it. Tang Hao seized the opening and used a powerful knee strike. Right when his flying figure was about to crash into Soft Mist, he heard his teammate warn him to watch out. A sneak attack? Tang Hao laughed coldly. He knew that Steamed Bun invasion was currently behind him and that the fellow was very restless. Tang Hao had been prepared. The powerful knee strike was originally an attack that could fly out at high speed. If he slightly turned his body, how could a sneak attack hit him? As he turned, Tang Hao shot a glance at Steamed Bun invasion behind him. The glance showed contempt. "Little guy, if you want to play with me, you're still lacking." Unfortunately, a handful of sand immediately blinded Demon Subduer's eyes. Why would you use a sand toss when sneaking up on a person from behind? Steamed Bun invasion turned out to use it, so when Tang Hao turned his head to look, he happened to be hit by it. His screen completely blacked out as if the power was cut. Tang Hao was about to go mad. In order to prevent the opponent from closing up on him, he quickly used a chain of punches and kicks for the sake of self-defense. But then, a satellite beam dropped down from the sky and completely engulfed Demon Subduer. Supporting any spot on the map was one of Su Mucheng's strengths. Screen cannon? This attack had an air of tactics to it. Feng Rui discovered that Happy's tempo provided many tactical options. Just a slight change could produce a different tactic. Tang Hao immediately fell back down after just gaining the upper hand. His other teammates were finally able to search for ways to retreat under Feng Rui's commands. The traps that the doubtful demon had buried started to reveal its might. The existence of traps was similar to the principle of a skill cooldown. As long as it was there and not set off, then it would be an excellent restriction and limitation. Feng Rui was able to see the awkwardness of Happy's formation in regards to the traps. They didn't bring their cleric, so they definitely wouldn't dare to use methods like clear them out forcibly with their characters. Their tempo slowed down immediately, which met Feng Rui's expectation. The players from Wind Howl slowly started to withdraw. But their captain, Demon Subduer was forcefully kept there. Feng Rui was gloomy. Happy even used such a shameful method like abducting a hostage. Should they return and launch a total fight with Happy with the help of traps? It seemed that this was the only way. The four made slight adjustments before advancing as a whole. This time, they kept a complete formation. Clang! A spike trap suddenly flipped up from the ground and clamped onto the knight's ankle. It locked his foot, so he wasn't able to move. The knight's player looked at Feng Rui with astonishment. Feng Rui didn't know whether he should cry or laugh. Are you stupid? Is it even possible for it to be my trap? Traps couldn't be triggered by allies, so there was no doubt that it had been placed there by Happy. Feng Rui knew Lord Grimm's Unspecialized possessed 3 traps. However, Feng Rui wasn't aware in the least about when this guy secretly planted his own trap among his. However, there were only 3 traps, so the threat wouldn't be too great. But the spike trap's effect in sealing one's movement was rather worrisome because their offense instantly became strangled. After that, Feng Rui realized that Yi Shu did something even more shameful. He summoned a goblin. That's right, compared to clearing the traps on one's own, there was one method that was even more grievous for fellow thieves. That was to summon creatures to clear out the traps. Unspecialized characters were too shameless. Feng Rui wept as he commanded everyone to destroy the goblin as soon as possible. However, under the command Yi Shu's control, the goblin was abnormally nimble. It managed to step into 3 mines before it died a heroic death. He can remember the location of my traps better than me, Feng Rui thought with a tear-streaked face. If he had these methods earlier on, why did he only just use it? Feng Rui now understood. In fact, he understood too well. It was in order to get an opportunity to kill Demon Subduer. Although Tang Hao was strong, he still feared being grouped on. People like Feng Rui wanted to rescue him, but they needed a systematic approach in their rescue. Unfortunately, Yi Shu's hidden trap was able to detonate Feng Rui's traps, which immediately messed up their plans. They could definitely continue to charge ahead, but if they did so, what difference would it be from the unplanned attacks they had launched previously? It would probably be oppressed by Happy in 2 or 3 moves again. Happy wasn't a jack-of-all-trades team that they could forcefully take down by merely relying on their skills. Happy was a pro team, so they had their own strength. Cut across to the right, Feng Rui called. His traps on that side were in good condition and could still be used. Wind Howl's players finally came over and met up with Tang Hao. The battle started once more. However, Feng Rui's original tactical plans were cut into bits and pieces earlier on. Retreat after rescuing Tang Hao. Feng Rui already made up his mind. He was resolute in not fighting with Happy and going at their pace. They wanted to retreat, but Happy wouldn't allow it. The power of focusing a single target was extremely prominent. They charged towards Demon Subduer, refusing to give up until he died. When had Tang Hao ever been this type of target? Fury burned in his heart. Feng Rui didn't understand. If they attacked forcefully like this, they could indeed take out Demon Subduer, but without a cleric, they would also take a lot of damage. Even if it was a 4v5, it was very possible for Wind Howl to wear them down to death. But considering the dungeon's contents, they would still have to face competition with the other teams. Without their ace player Tang Hao, they couldn't bear this trade. However, the current situation didn't leave them with any choice because Happy was the side attacking. Either the fish dies or the net splits. Feng Rui couldn't come up with any ideas. Tang Hao also seemed to have understood the situation, and that it was very possible for his character to die the earliest. However, he could also strive for the team's victory. Due to his professional attitude, he wasn't discouraged. In fact, he fought even fiercer than before. If he could exchange the team's victory by sacrificing himself, then he would have fulfilled his responsibilities as the ace. Demon Subduer finally fell. As Feng Rui had predicted, Team Happy had paid a great price for this kill. Let's see how you'll keep going, Feng Rui thought. He then heard Yi Shu cry out, F***ck, the shard wasn't on him? Retreat. F***ck, that was their aim? Feng Rui felt like fainting.